As I walked into the quarterly executive meeting, my husband's smug expression morphed into shock. 5 years ago, he left me for his assistant, claiming I'd never understand the business world. Today, as the new owner of Meridian Enterprises, I was about to announce his termination. The executive boardroom was silent as I stepped forward, my tailored Navy suit exuding authority. Vivian Chen, representing Horizon Capital Partners, the secretary announced. The room tensed. None had expected me. Alexander Reed, my ex-husband, sat halfway down the table, his platinum cufflinks glinting. Beside him, Natalie Barnes, once his assistant, now his fiancée, looked between us, confused. As of 9 a.m., Horizon Capital Partners has completed its acquisition of Meridian Enterprises, I stated. The executives expected corporate reassurances. Instead, they received termination notices, 7 in total, including Alexander. "This is absurd," he hissed. "You can't do this!" I met his glare with calm indifference. "The board unanimously approved the acquisition and restructuring. Your financial mismanagement left no choice." 5 years ago, he told me. "You'll never make it in this world, Viv." That night I collapsed in heartbreak. Today I stood before him, stronger, smarter, and in control. As security approached, he made one last attempt. "You'll ruin everything I built." I leaned in. "I'm not running your company, Alexander. I'm rebuilding mine." He was escorted out. I took my rightful seat at the head of the table. The journey had been brutal, but as I looked around, I knew I had won. The terms are fair. The words came out as barely a whisper. Alexander paused in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. For a moment, Vivian thought she saw a flicker of regret cross his face. "You're a brilliant woman, Viv, but business requires a certain ruthlessness you've never had." Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving Vivian standing alone in their meticulously designed bedroom. The rain tapped against the glass, the only response to her unraveling world. She didn't move for hours, frozen as if any motion would make this nightmare real. Outside, the Seattle skyline emerged from the storm, unchanged, while her life lay in ruins. Their home, once featured in magazines, now felt like an elaborate stage set, beautiful but hollow. Every carefully chosen piece of furniture, every curated artwork, suddenly belonged to another life. The walk-in closet Alexander had just emptied had been designed with dual sides, his and hers. Now his absence created a void as tangible as the one in her chest. His cologne lingered in the air, a scent both comforting and nauseating. The night stretched endlessly. By morning, Vivian had not slept. When the automated blinds rose at precisely 6:15 a.m., Alexander's preferred schedule, she stared at the city below, knowing somewhere he and Natalie were beginning their new life amid the wreckage of hers. Their house, once a symbol of success, had become a mausoleum of shattered dreams. At 9 a.m., her phone rang. Alexander's name flashed on the screen. Some last vestige of professionalism compelled her to answer. "I'm glad you picked up," he said, his voice brisk. "HR has scheduled a meeting at 11 to finalize your transition package. It would be best if you came to the office one last time to sign the paperwork." Vivian gripped the counter, her knuckles whitening. Through the phone, she could hear the background hum of Meridian's headquarters, employees chatting, the espresso machine hissing, phones ringing, life going on without her. "Vivian, are you there?" "Yes," she managed, swallowing the tightness in her throat. "Good. 11 a.m. then. Natalie will send the details. Bring your company laptop and access. Cards, Natalie." The woman who had replaced her in Alexander's bed was now facilitating her removal from the company she had co-founded. A fresh wave of nausea hit her. "I'll be there," she said, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. After hanging up, she moved to the bathroom. The pale, hollow-eyed woman in the mirror was a stranger, but she would not go to her execution as a broken woman. With careful precision, she applied her makeup, layer by layer, reclaiming control. A crisp white shirt, a charcoal pencil skirt, armor for the battle ahead. The pain was still raw, but something else stirred beneath it. Not hope, not yet, but determination. The Meridian Enterprises headquarters occupied the top 8 floors of a downtown Seattle skyscraper. As Vivian stepped off the elevator at 10:45, employees glanced up, then quickly looked away. News had traveled fast. "Good morning, Miss Chen." Michael, the security guard, greeted her. His usual warm smile was replaced with awkward sympathy. Vivian nodded, unable to trust her voice. The receptionist, a new hire who didn't recognize her, spoke neutrally. "Ms. Chen, HR's expecting you. 5th floor, conference room C." Not the executive floor. Not Alexander's office. Not the boardroom. Conference room C, a windowless, impersonal space reserved for low-level interviews. The message was clear. This was to be quick and clinical. Inside, Stephanie Winters from HR, a company attorney, and Natalie Barnes were already seated. Natalie, poised and professional, wore a dress Vivian recognized from a past holiday party. While Vivian had been playing the perfect corporate wife, Natalie had been positioning herself for more. "Where's Alexander?" Vivian asked, taking her seat. "Mr. Reed thought it best not to be present," Natalie answered smoothly. "He wanted this transition handled with appropriate sensitivity." The audacity. He couldn't even face her. Vivian nearly laughed at the final insult. "I see." The attorney slid a thick document across the table. "We've prepared a generous severance package. In exchange for your shares being bought out, you'll sign a comprehensive non-compete." Vivian flipped to the relevant section. 3 years. He wasn't just forcing her out. He was ensuring she couldn't work in her field for 3 years. The ruthless calculation of it stole her breath. "And if I don't sign?" she asked, though she already knew. The attorney's expression tightened. "Mr. Reed hoped it wouldn't come to that. But if you refuse, the company is prepared to proceed with a performance-based termination." Performance-based? The taste of betrayal was bitter. Natalie leaned forward. "There's documentation of missed opportunities due to your cautious approach. The board has reviewed these cases and supports the assessment." Of course, Alexander had been building his case for months, turning every strategic debate into evidence of her incompetence. Vivian looked directly at Natalie, truly seeing her for the first time. The younger woman wasn't just Alexander's lover. She was his perfect corporate partner. Where Vivian had challenged, Natalie had agreed. Where Vivian had urged caution, Natalie had encouraged risk. She was everything Vivian wasn't. And that included being on the winning side of this coup. Vivian exhaled slowly, centering herself. "I'd like to review the document in private." Her voice was calm, collected, the mask of composure firmly in place. What they didn't know, what even Vivian herself didn't fully grasp yet, was that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. As the door closed behind Stephanie and the others, Vivian let her carefully maintained composure slip. The conference room felt suffocating. She had built Meridian from the ground up. Now she was being erased, methodically and completely. Skimming the agreement, she noted the generous financial terms. Alexander wasn't just buying her out. He was buying her silence. A knock startled her. Lisa Kwan, Meridian's VP of Product Development and one of the few executives Vivian had personally hired, slipped inside. "Don't sign," Lisa urged. "Alexander's been rewriting history, discrediting your contributions. He's gambling everything on aggressive expansion." Vivian's anger crystallized into resolve. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's wrong, and because I'm leaving too. Others are as well." Vivian squeezed Lisa's hand, gratitude grounding her. She wasn't alone. When Stephanie, Marcus, and Natalie returned, Vivian was composed. "Have you reviewed the terms?" Marcus asked. "Yes," she replied. "And I have a counterproposal." Surprise flickered across their faces. "This isn't a negotiation," Natalie said condescendingly. Vivian held her gaze. 1 year non-compete instead of 3. Marcus hesitated. "I'll need to consult with Alexander. I'll wait." As they left, a sense of calm settled over Vivian. This small act of defiance was the first step. She didn't yet know how, but she would rebuild. 45 minutes later, Alexander entered, his presence commanding as ever. "The non-compete is non-negotiable," he said. Vivian met his gaze. "Convenient for you. You orchestrated this. Built a case against me, secured the board's loyalty, then pushed me out." Alexander's expression hardened. "It's business, Vivian." "No," she said. "It's personal." He checked his watch, impatient. "If you must know, Natalie and I realized our compatibility a year ago." A year. While Vivian was building Meridian, Alexander had been planning her replacement. The betrayal settled into something cold and sharp inside her. "You don't get to rewrite history," she said. His patience thinned. "Companies evolve. Your approach was holding us back." "My approach kept us solvent while others collapsed," she countered. 1 year non-compete. 2 years, final offer. Vivian considered. It wasn't ideal, but it wasn't a death sentence. "Fine." Alexander nodded, signaling the end of negotiations. As he stood, she stopped him. "You've won. The company. The board. Natalie. Everything you wanted." She held his gaze. "Remember this moment?" Something flickered in his eyes before he masked it. "Goodbye, Vivian." She gathered her belongings from her office, so little to show for so much. Through the glass, she saw Alexander and Natalie already moving forward. The pain was still there, but it had transformed. Not yet determination, not quite resolve, but close. Outside, rain poured as Vivian sat in her car. Meridian, Alexander, her past. It all blurred behind the downpour.